Hello again, and thank you for joining us in the Providence College podcast. I'm Charlie Joyce, your host today. Our producer is Chris Judge of the class of 2005. Our guest today is Dr. Raymond Hain, Associate Professor of Philosophy and Associate Director of the Humanities Program. He also is the founder and director of the Humanities Forum, which will begin its fifth year of programming this fall. Dr. Hain holds a PhD from the University of Notre Dame and has taught at Providence College for 8 years. His areas of expertise include ethics, the history of ethics, practical reason, and applied ethics. Welcome to the Providence College podcast, Raymond.
Thank you, Charlie. It's a pleasure to be here.
You know, it seems there's been a heightened emphasis, I think, on the humanities at PC for several years now. Most visibly, that's probably indicated in the Ruane Center for the Humanities, which opened in 2013. But obviously, Raymond, it's more than buildings. Tell us a little bit about the state of the humanities at PC these days.
Well, if I had to say it briefly, I'd probably say it's the best of times and it's the worst of times, in a sense, at PC. It's the best of times because Providence College has an enormous investment, maintains an enormous investment in the humanities at PC. The new building is evidence of that. The restructured DWC program is evidence of that. Our core humanities program, especially DWC, is almost unique in the country, especially the investment that PC puts into it with the team teaching that happens in that program. It's really quite extraordinary. And I think PC has a renewed commitment to that over the last 5-10 years. Like the rest of the academy, though, the humanities they face a number of challenges today. In this sense, I think PC is not particularly unusual. Humanities majors are down a little bit over the last 10 years. Other majors, especially pre-professional majors, are up. And that's evidence, I think, of a broader uncertainty about the role the humanities should play in education in the United States. And PC, like other institutions, has to think about creative responses to that, I think.
When you say uncertainty, Raymond, can you elaborate a little bit more on that? And it's something you said that you're seeing nationally.
Ever since Plato wrote the Republic, people have been nervous about the payoff of the study of the humanities. How will the humanities help you professionally in your vocation, in your career, and so on? That kind of anxiety about the humanities is nothing new. And in the history of education, it tends to go in waves. People at one time or another become more or less nervous about it. And the humanities, in one way, is constantly defending itself or rephrasing what it contributes to society. And I think, in the mid-20th century, the humanities was not put on the spot in quite the way that it is today. In a sense, those of us in the humanities need to be very thoughtful, intentional about how we think about what we do and how we defend it to others. And we just face today a little more pressure than we did 50, 60 years ago. I don't think it's not something new. It's happened plenty of times before in the past. But that doesn't mean we don't have to be very thoughtful and not ignore the kinds of questions that people are raising.
From your viewpoint, where do the humanities fit in within a liberal arts education?
I think of the humanities myself, I think as doing two core things. The one thing it does is provide probably the most rich place in liberal education for reflecting on the deepest questions we face as human beings. The nature of the transcendent, human nature, what happiness is, what society should look like. Those kinds of questions are, in a sense, peripheral outside the humanities. They're still important in other disciplines, but in the humanities, in a sense, it's our purpose to ask those kind of questions in different ways. The other thing I think the humanities is very good at is thinking about the integration of the various parts of education. This isn't always something humanities professors think about. You can be an English professor or a philosopher and just think about your particular discipline. But because of the kinds of questions the humanities forces us to ask, the issue of integration of learning, integration of the various parts of human life, various parts of human society, those are natural questions for the humanities to ask. And it's sort of, in a way, it connects to my own work. I think of my work of trying to bring the campus together around the humanities as an essential issue or part of the humanities themselves.
Great. In terms of your work, Humanities Forum in particular is one significant enhancement, Raymond, that you and the program have brought to PC. For those unfamiliar with the Humanities Forum, it's a weekly program that's offered in the fall and the spring, and it's open to the college community. It's an opportunity really to engage in the intellectual life outside the classroom. You started the forum back in 2016, and it seems to me that momentum has been sustained. Are you surprised at that at all?
I think that's a great question. Very pleased, certainly. In a sense, I'm not exactly surprised because it had been my hope, really, and kind of my conviction that the kinds of things that we were trying to organize were sort of wanted without people knowing it. I think I would be, in a sense, if things had not gone so well and people had not been particularly interested in what we wanted to offer, I would have been disappointed. But I also would have been more surprised in that case, because I'm convinced that the kinds of things we're doing, rooted as they are in the humanities and the big questions of human life, are sort of intrinsically interesting, intrinsically compelling. People may not know they want that sort of thing until they see it. So in a sense, I was gratified. I still remain gratified and very grateful to all those people who helped make this possible. But in a sense, not as surprised as one might think. I'm very glad to almost have my hopes confirmed.
Sure. What then has made the forum so successful?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts to what we do. I suppose if I had to think back to the beginning, to the thing that really helped people be excited, I think it's the attempt on the part of us who organized this to bring as many people together as possible. There was some skepticism in the beginning that we were trying to do too much. A weekly event, typically we meet on Friday afternoons, is ambitious. We run 20 to 25 events a year, an academic year, and that's quite a lot. A lot of people said, well, why don't you do 2 a semester or maybe 5? Which is perfectly understandable. It's a lot of organizational work and planning work to do as much as we do. But what that allows us to do is to offer something for almost for everyone. We want the business school involved. We want the hard sciences involved if we can get them involved, the social sciences. We want to involve the arts. We try to have a film each semester. We try to have a musical event each semester. We want to involve all 4 of the core DWC departments. So when we began this, we were asking probably 20 to 25 departments and offices around campus for their support, for their suggestions, even for particular people who would host events for us. Our first event was Song Woo Kong in the music department. And that kind of widespread collaboration, I think, really it was something new for lots of people at PC. People didn't realize that there was so much kind of collaborative interest that we could tap into, and I think that made people excited. And I hope we can sustain that, to be honest.
Yeah, that's the thing, that the program really is very varies in great deal in terms of program. Last year, I know you had Anthony Ray Hinton, a former death row inmate, come to campus.
That's right.
I'm not quite sure if people really realize the wide expanse of the program. Yeah, I would imagine that's part of the appeal. Do you feel?
I think
that's
so.
The case? Yeah.
I certainly hope so. Yeah. I mean, our hope always was that there'd be a core of people who would want to come regularly, and they would sort of see all the different things we're doing as parts of the same puzzle and would want to be a part of that. But it's perfectly fine if, you only want to come to one or two things a year. I think that's great. We're still offering something kind of deeply valuable, even if, any particular person might only go to one or two things a year. I think that's fine. That's a good thing.
And in terms of selection of, I'll say, presenters and programming, certain criteria at all come into play, Raymond, in your mind? I imagine you do most of the programming yourself.
I have a very important committee that helps me organize things. The very fact that our program is so diverse means that there is no way that I could come up with all these ideas by myself. I'm, as you mentioned at the beginning, I'm an ethicist, moral philosopher. My work in the humanities over the last, 8 years has increased my knowledge a lot, but there's just no way I could do it without help. So I have a committee of representatives from the 4 Civ departments, from the honors program, from the DWC program, and they send me ideas all the time. I keep a running list of possible events, which up to now is probably around 100, 150 ideas. And we're always getting new ones. We might pull some from the list when it comes time to plan a semester. So it really is yes, of course I have a kind of central planning role, but it's a really collaborative project. So how do we think about the structure of the forum? One of our goals is not just the integration of the campus around, a particular set of events in the humanities, but also integration of the various things we already do on campus. So the forum's very closely integrated with the DWC program in the following ways. In the fall, DWC students will study the ancient world or the modern world. All the events in the fall are keyed to those 2 semesters. And they even happen at a time, as much as we can do this, when students will be reading relevant texts. So Emily Wilson, the first woman to translate Homer's Odyssey into English, will be here at the beginning of September this fall, and she will be presenting at a time when students will be reading the Odyssey. We don't have in the fall any events that naturally fall in the Middle Ages, for example. That'd be in the spring. So we try really hard to integrate what we're doing with the sorts of things happening in the 2-year DWC core. It's also very important for us to get broad connections to other parts of campus, so we try always to do a musical or arts event of some sort. We try to do something with the business school every year, sometimes each semester. Sylvia Maxfield, our dean, was able to present for us herself last fall, which was a great event. So we try as much as possible to make what we do something that realizes what's already happening elsewhere on campus. And it makes it easier, frankly, for people to tap into what we're doing.
Sure. You mentioned one person already. Can you give us a glimpse into a few other highlights this fall at this point?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So this fall, each semester, although we have 10 to 12 events or so, each semester also has a kind of mini theme. So the theme this fall is the essays and speeches of Abraham Lincoln. So we have 3 events in the fall connected to Lincoln. One of them is a screening of the 2012 Steven Spielberg film, Lincoln. And as part of that, we're going to have the screening hosted by Michael Vorenberg, who will give a lecture the previous week. His work was instrumental to Spielberg as he was making the film. His book was one of the main references. And he's going to come and talk about the film, talk about his own work, which I think will be a great 2-week series. We'll also, at the end of the semester, have Alan Gelzo come, who's quite a distinguished Lincoln scholar, and he's going to speak about the intellectual environment in the 19th century, Lincoln. We're really excited for that. Emily Wilson, as I mentioned, we have a violinist and doctor from Harvard coming down. She works in music and medicine. She'll be presenting and playing along with Alicia Carlson, one of our own in the philosophy department who's also a violinist, also in September. And we have lots of other stuff. We're really excited about the fall.
That sounds very enticing, no question about it. And what a variety of programming, again, speaking to that variety and reaching out to different levels and people in the academic community here at the college. That's wonderful. Let's talk about a couple of other initiatives supported by the Humanities Program. First off, the Humanities Reading Seminar, Raymond, which is held year-round. Tell us about that program, the seminar.
This, in a sense, this is the genesis of the other things. So the first thing I worked on organizing, this is long before these things were included in the Humanities Program, was just a regular reading seminar, time for discussion with faculty on a classic text or series of texts that were closely related. This summer, so these run 3 times a year, the fall, the spring, and the summer, and this summer is our 21st iteration of this. So we've been doing these for a while. The purpose of them really, and inspired frankly by the DWC program itself, was to provide a venue for faculty and eventually also administrators. Their inclusion is really important to me, to have a reasonably high-level discussion about a text, and that's interdisciplinary, so people from all over campus are a part of this. Eventually, when it came time to develop the forum, we realized that one way of improving our discussions was to integrate those reading seminars with the forum. So, for example, our reading seminar in the fall is on Lincoln. The 3 events and our 2 guests will take place on Fridays. We meet for the reading seminar on Fridays. Michael Vorenberg, before his public lecture, will come to our discussion. Usually happens over lunch earlier in the day. And our dinner, we'll have a dinner with him in the evening, and a lot of the Lincoln seminar participants will be a part of that. This is a couple years ago now, we also started a student reading seminar, which is same structure. It's just with students. It's only 1 credit, but there are 2 professors who lead those seminars. And those students also will be invited to the dinner with the guests, and if they have time, to come to the faculty discussion on the Friday.
So there's really wonderful integration between the forum and the seminar, and everything largely seems connected, intentionally so, to our curriculum in many cases.
Absolutely.
It's something that's well thought out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, so a couple years ago, our seminar was on Du Bois, W.B. Du Bois, and we had a couple guests come, and it was very gratifying to have in our faculty seminar several faculty members who were new to Du Bois and were teaching Civ the same semester, and they decided to assign Du Bois in part because they were a part of this seminar. They used the seminar to develop their own reflections and knowledge of Du Bois, and then they integrated that into their class. And that's exactly the kind of thing we're hoping for.
You mentioned a term earlier, I think it was revolving around text discussion with faculty, intellectual discussion, I believe was the terminology used. Does that kind of thing happen beyond text? Of course, the context I asked you was a reading seminar. Does that kind of thing happen a lot as a faculty member? That's something that with schedules and all sorts of commitments here, that you can really avail yourself to or make happen.
I would say, being at PC has really made all this stuff possible. So the DWC program, when I arrived, almost instantaneously, I was a member of a department of about 80 people, rather than, say, 20, which is already a large department. The kind of conversations that DWC makes possible, encourages between faculty in an interdisciplinary way is really extraordinary. That kind of experience inspired the thinking about what the humanities might be able to do, not just for students, but for faculty too. Just thinking about, I'll give you an example from my own experience here. One of our early reading seminar texts was Tocqueville, Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America. And we picked it because it was recommended by one of our colleagues. We had a great semester discussing it. And myself and a colleague of mine in the history department, Patrick Breen, decided to teach a DWC colloquium on that book. So we did that for a couple years. Then we found an opportunity to apply to an NEH summer seminar on Tocqueville and democracy in America, which we did. Then we had such a great time. We ended up running a conference on Tocqueville here at PC, and we had as our keynote speaker Arthur Goldhammer, who spoke for the forum that Friday. And then we were part of a volume of essays published by Anthem Press on Tocqueville. So there's a hope that the work that we're doing really has important implications, not just in the classroom, but in the intellectual lives, the scholarly lives of the faculty as a whole. And PC really kind of makes that possible because of the DWC program. The ground is fertile in a way that would be much more challenging at other institutions.
One of the other programs that Humanities supports is the Lunches in Ray. It's a newer initiative directed towards students, but not necessarily for academic purposes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Probably one of our most important goals is that we want to create an intellectual community. And how do you do that? How do you try to bring people together in that way so that they're having meaningful relationships with one another that are intellectual, not only intellectual, of course, though since we're at a liberal arts school, there's a kind of special place for that. One of the original ways we thought about that was the receptions after our Friday events are very important to us. We try to have some good food and so on, and they're extended in a way. They're meant to last about an hour to provide a regular opportunity for faculty, administrators, students to be together in a relaxed setting. When we were trying to think about a way to deepen these kinds of opportunities, it really seemed, I think this is probably right, that the most likely location to develop kind of rich but relaxed mentoring relationships between faculty and one another is probably over a meal. And Raymond Dining Hall is the most central location for this. It's the most likely place where you won't just have kind of intentional meetings, but where you'll have accidental interactions. If you go and eat lunch in Ray by yourself every day, it's still very likely that you're going to say hi to 10 or 15 people who you just happen to recognize. And those kinds of interactions are very important for the sustaining of any community, let alone, of course, ours in particular. So we thought Lunches in Ray is a new thing. Last spring, we were able to offer a meal plan to about 20 faculty in the humanities to eat lunch in Ray once a week. There were no strings attached. They just had to go. We hoped that they'd eat with one another and with students and so on. And the experiences were very mixed. Some people had a really kind of rich engagement with students who might already be in their classes, and they said, hey, come join me for lunch, or they might run into students accidentally. Other people ate more by themselves, but they, again, had lots of sort of accidental interactions, which I think are really important. So we're very hopeful for this. As I say to people, I would like every employee at PC to be able to eat for free in Ray Monday through Friday. That's a bit of a pipe dream, but I think in some ways it would transform our campus.
Yeah, you have mentioned, that this does have great potential. What's in your wildest dreams in terms of this, Raymond?
Well, if everybody could, and there may be some logistical problems just because Ray is only so big, but in my wildest dreams, there's a central location on campus where people eat. For the employees of PC, the most important meal for them as employees of PC is lunch. Many people meet with one another over lunch and so on. If people thought of eating lunch in Ray as part of their regular professional life, the kinds of things that would make possible, that would happen accidentally, are really extraordinary. One of the things that sustains a community most is a location where people have to go there. They're not going there because they need to meet with someone. They have to go there for some other reason. The most famous and obvious example from sort of average business life is the water cooler. Because the water cooler exists as it does, something people need to go to get a little water now and again, it creates a natural locus for social activity. That's what Ray can be for PC. I think we need to think about it. I think it's worth thinking about very intentionally as a community about what that might make possible for us.
One of the things I wanted to follow up with you on is the significance of the Ruane Center for the Humanities. Obviously, as you know, the building is named for Michael and Elizabeth Ruane. Michael's a class of 1971 and a former trustee. Mm-hmm. It seems to me it's more than just a building. Can you talk about the significance to Providence College and the higher education community here about the building?
I mean, when I think about buildings, and I mean, as it happens, as you mentioned, I do some work in applied ethics, and some of that is in the ethics of architecture, actually. So when I think about a community building its buildings, you're absolutely right. Those buildings represent the commitments, the interests, the loves, really, of a particular institution. So when Ruane gets placed prominently, I think, on the main kind of square of the campus, when it's built as it is, with some care, it's a great space to be in. It's a beautiful space to be in. And in particular, too, what I want to mention is the purpose-built seminar rooms, that represents a significant commitment on the part of the college to a particular kind of pedagogy. Those rooms can't be used for other things. You know, they're reasonably small. There are a lot of them in Ruane. What that means is that PC has made a long-term commitment to a certain kind of liberal arts education in its core, which is, in one sense it's symbolic, but it also sort of permeates the life of all the students who come through here. And that's impressive and remarkable, and something we should be grateful for.
Excellent. Raymond, it's good to see the humanities flourishing so much here at the college in so many ways, as you have mentioned. Thanks a lot for your perspective and for being our guest today.
Thanks for having me, Charlie.
And thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us on the Providence College podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast in all the usual places: iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, and Spotify. Thanks again to our producer, Chris Judge. I'm Charlie Joyce. Until next time.